Hello and welcome to another episode of the CG Garage. This is episode number 351, featuring Victor Bonafonte, the man, the legend, the CEO, the creative director, and the architect behind Beauty and the Bit. A really cool guy who I met for the first time at THU and is a fantastic creative person. Kristen, what did you think of Victor?
Oh, Victor, so nice. The podcast, he kind of starts off with like how Beauty and the Bit kind of came to be and how he kind of pushes the boundaries of the arch-viz world. And you both discuss like how the narrative of the story or narrative story of the project that they're working on is almost more important than the technical side, which also goes to their short that they made it like 3 years ago called Landmark, which we will link to this. And it was their first atmospheric short film that sets out to be more of a cinematic story driven approach to arch-viz films. So it's very awesome to watch. And then he also kind of talks about what's next for him in his creative direction, moving a little bit out of architecture world and more into VR, music, video games, but really interesting podcast.
Yeah, he's really great, and what's really interesting, he like you said, we met at THU, which was really cool, and that was sort of one of the things that sort of inspired him to tell more stories rather than just tell interesting stories, shall we say? Everyone tries to tell a story, but thinking about what that story really means and make it interesting is a very cool thing. So it was really great to talk to him. He's a very charismatic person, and really a lot of fun, and can't wait to meet him in person again sometime soon. All right, let's have a couple of announcements. There's something going on, but people have one more day to do it. So tell us what it is, Kristen.
Yes, so this is the Student Rendering Challenge. So submissions will be due tomorrow, November 23rd. And this year the theme is Create a Better World. And we'd just like you to share your vision with us. And you have a chance to win awesome prizes, including V-Ray collection, Corona licenses, Chaos Cloud credits, a lot more, but go to chaos.com/create-a-better-world. Sorry, it's a long one.
Perfect. Create a better world with dashes between all of the words. Yeah. So go ahead and check that out. And it's obviously there's a link on our website as well, but you only have one more day to do it. So make sure you get your submissions in ASAP. In terms of products, we have one product announcement right now, which is V-Ray 5 Update 2 for Maya is out. Go ahead and check it out. There's a lot of new updates, cool updates that are in there, including some great cloud benefits that have been added to it, and a lot of updates on USD support. So we have a lot of cool things on USD support, including supporting lights inside of USD files as well. So lots of great stuff. Go check it out at chaos.com. Now, if people want to know more about the podcast, Kristen, where can they go?
You can go to facebook.com/CG Garage Podcast or chaos.com/CG Garage. And if you would like to watch us, go to youtube.com/Chaos Group TV.
Perfect. And if you guys have ideas of podcasts you'd like us to do, please let us know. We're labs at chaosgroup.com is the best way to contact us. And we do listen to your ideas, and we do make the recordings of those. So please let us know what those are. We'd love to have them on. And of course, don't forget to rate us and review us on Apple Podcast and share us with all your friends and family. But for now, enjoy episode number 351, Victor Bonafonte.
Welcome to another CG Garage, where the Chaos Group talks. You'll know it's over when the last bucket drops. We're gonna fire off rays in high dynamic range. We know that ambient occlusion is passé. Global illumination won't lead you astray. And while image-based lighting is really swell, you need to make sure everything has Fresnel.
I think the last time we saw each other in person was at Total Chaos.
Yeah, Total Chaos, because previous to that we saw in Trojan Horse, I think it was where we met firstly.
You're at THU, yeah?
Yeah. But after that we saw in Total Chaos, that's it, in 1917 or 18? Or 19,
18, I think.
18, yeah.
18 or 19, which is cool.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. All right, so I think people are going to want to know a little bit about your origin story and the kind of cool stuff you do. Your work is superb, and we will definitely put links of some of the amazing projects you guys have done. But I'd like to know a little bit about you and how you got started in doing all these things that you got involved with.
Oh, cool. So yeah, first things first. Yeah, I'm an architect, basically, in formation, and at some point I was like working as a regular architect. I was working in an architectural firm, more focusing retail here in Madrid. So I worked there for 10 years, I think, and I was doing like typical stuff from an architect, signing projects, designing projects, etc. Nothing super exciting in terms of, you know, big stadiums and stuff like that. It was like more residential kind of stuff, office thing. But eventually, at some point, crisis came to Spain. It was like 2011 or something like that. And it struck us, I mean, all the colleagues in my profession were like completely devastated here in Spain. And from one day to the other, we ended up with no jobs, basically. So the thing is that I was the only geek at the studio, because my studio was a little bit old school studio that was interested in like 3D stuff and, you know, trying to orbit around the buildings and stuff. So I got a little bit into or interested in that 3-dimensional quality of architecture, and I started to get myself into programs such as SketchUp, with all the people like hates at some point, but I had to say that it was my beginning on the 3D world. So for me, it's like, okay, I own something to this guy. So then I jumped into 3ds Max, etc., and then from that point I started to get interested in that. So at that point my boss fired me because they had no other option, but in parallel they started like another kind of little studio that was exclusively devoted to competitions. And as I was really interested in that, he hired me as a part of that studio, which was like 2-3 people. And it served me as a test tube for, let's say, 1 year to realize that I would love to do something that was more involved with the plastic side of architecture, not the practical side. Because for me, it was like processes, really long processes to accomplish, etc., etc. So I decided to try on that. And in parallel, I was speaking to my wife. My first son was about to be born, and I told her, okay, I would like to try a little bit and do our own company that it's for architectural communication or visualization, call it whatever. And basically that was like the how Beauty and the Beat was born. And from, I mean, all has been like, from that point, all has been an evolution in terms that right nowadays I'm creative director here at Beauty and the Beat, and at the same point from last year I'm working as the art director of kind of a video games, music related with video games company from it's going to be like 1 year now, right now, which is Stage 11, is my other company right now.
Okay, well, we're going to get into that because that sounds very interesting. You want to know what's going on there. But it sounds like it's very similar to, you know, honestly, I was an architect as well, as you may know. And that was one of the things that drove me, is like, I don't really know if I care if the building is built or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the point. At some point it was like, okay, I care more about how it looks, or how I would like it to look, most likely.
Right. And I think there's something to be said about that. That's not to diminish architecture. I think that's just a passion about it. And I think, but also I think obviously some of the things, especially in Beauty and the Bit, is that you find, it seems to me that you find much more interest in the narrative and the story that the architecture has, instead of the actual, like, does the light switch work? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it's even more challenging. I always say the same. It's like even more challenging to work with projects which are not so spectacular, because in the end, it's way harder to showcase the best angle of that building. But at the same time, it's the most challenging side of things. And yes, from the beginning, we have always, or at least it has been our struggle to try to tell a story that it's like personal, it's ours, it's different at some point, because I've been like growing architecture, and at some point for me it was like kind of level achieved or level unlocked. Let's pass to other thing. Let's try to invest time in searching or researching in VFX, in movies, in animation, not the usual way it's done in architecture, etc., etc. And for me, I always see it like as a never-ending kind of a path. It's like you are interested in this, you achieve this, you unlock this, you pass and go to the other another thing you want to unlock, etc., etc. Basically.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I honestly I want to know more about some of the pieces you've done that you've illustrated, and obviously you do work for actual architects and showcase their architecture as well, obviously. But you've done your own passion projects for the company or some narratives that you've done out there. So, what was the inspiration for doing that, and what sort of were some of the things that drove you to do that, and how does that serve the company in a sense beyond just doing something for your own satisfaction?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything like comes in a way, in an organic way. How this started was because at some point it was like, okay, we have managed and we have the pleasure and we are lucky to be working with top-notch architecture studios worldwide. But once you get that, it's like you wanted to do that and you achieved that, and it's like, okay, it's cool. I work with this big architect, this other big architect, etc., etc. But you realize at some point it's like, okay, we have done this, but there's something that's still missing because the client is there. At some point, it's difficult to impose your artistic vision, or at least at the beginning when you're not so well known. So for us, it was like, okay, let's start doing something that is exclusively for us. No, so we started like doing this kind of challenge I call like image of the month. We did like half a year images of the month, or even more. I don't know. And it was like, okay, we found out time in our really busy schedule always to do one image on our own without no contamination from clients. It's exclusively us. And we started to publish that because I thought it was a nice idea in terms for the studio's morale and also for showcasing people that it's important to start doing your own thing, your personal projects, no? And from that point, it became landmark. And honestly, it was really inspiring for me, the THU, the place when I met you first time, because for me it was like it wasn't my usual media, and I started to go to art events more than architecture at that point, but that was like the biggest one, and that served me as a motivation. So when I finished that and I came back to Madrid after holidays, I told the guys, okay, why instead of doing like static images of the month, we do a movie which is on our own, which is like, it was landmark. And for me, the idea was trying to do exactly what nobody allows you normally to do in a film, in an architectural film, and it was freaking awesome. That was one of the most beautiful experiences I've had, because it was like all the team working like 1 year in that movie when we did have some time on that. I stepped aside the production of the studio at that point and did like a year course in VFX, in lots of stuff, new stuff for me. So it was completely refreshing, and I think obviously that served to the company, because it's like, okay, when you do something with all your guts, normally it turns out well, and in this case it turned out well because that was like a movie that was seen a lot, not only in architectural circles but in cinema circles, little festivals, etc. And it was also the catapult for doing Rebirth with Quixel and the people from Epic Games, etc.
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating because what is interesting is, I mean, I've been to THU many times, as you know, and it's one of my favorite events. But there's a lot of architects who went there who found inspiration from something outside of the typical architecture courses and the typical architectural views. And there's a way, an attitude of like, well, we've always done it this way and it's always been successful, so why would it ever change, right? And I think when you look at it, I mean, it's very clear to me when I saw what you did, is like you were inspired by concept arts, and concept art can be a very different way of looking at things instead of looking at the traditional architectural way of doing things. At the same time, you were telling a story about architecture without any people in it in a lot of ways. So so that's a very difficult thing, right? I mean, you're trying to tell a narrative that's very interesting and very different. And I found it very cool. I do remember Joe Kaczynski's very first visual effects project that not visual effects project, sorry, ArchViz project that he did about the desert house. I don't know if you remember that, but that was a similar thing, right? He was telling the story of a space, and everyone was like, whoa, you can tell an entire story without any people in it, you know, and that was really kind of an amazing thing. So I thought that was really great. Do you feel that what you did on that project has allowed you to showcase to your customers saying, here's something that you can do? Did you ever think of that?
Yeah,
you know?
basically the idea was that, I mean, it had several ramifications. Obviously, the first one and most important was doing something for the pure pleasure of doing a film on ourselves, and which was related, or with the target was more in filmmaking than in architectural communication. But obviously the second kind of intent was to showcase architects. Okay, guys, we don't necessarily need to stick out to the usual convention of what is supposed to be an architectural film, because that's fake. I mean, I don't believe that an architectural film should be a never-ending flying throughs that makes you want to vomit because you're sick, or putting 3D people here and there looking like really badly rigged, etc., and looking like shit, basically. So that is why it was. That was my main aim. Was okay, guys. If you would love to make an architectural film with us, be prepared to do something cool. But we would need to be, or to agree that it should be something more artistic than the typical descriptive architectural film, basically. And that's what happened recently, for example, with Sound of Ink, which was something that we did this year with our nice friends of Schmidt Hamelassen. It's something more architectural, it's less cinematographical in terms of the mood, etc., but still has that vibe at some point.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about that original piece you guys did. Tell me a little bit about, because some people may not have seen it, and they should go see it. We'll put the link on our site for sure. But tell them a little bit about, what was your inspiration? What was driving you, and what was the story you're trying to tell in this? And so give us a little bit of an idea of that.
Yeah. In the Sound of Ink, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the thing was that was a project that basically was like a second house for us, because we started doing this project with SHL for six times in a row for that competition, I think. So we think we know pretty cool in a really pretty accurate way the spaces in that library, which is in Shanghai. It's in the Pudong district. It's one of the It's a project that is going to be finished this year, I think.
Okay.
I think end of this year, and at some point it was like we were like discussing with them, and they wanted us to do like a little featurette, a little movie about that place. So for us it was like, as I said, a second home, because we already knew the project. We did lots of images, and this way they won the competition. So for us. And honestly, we have a really amazing relation with them for lots of years, and that's the cool thing when you get to a point with a client in which they trust you, basically, artistically speaking. They trust your vision and they support your vision, and that was what happened in that project. For us, it was like, okay, we want to do a really badass movie of your architectural cool piece, and we want to do something like, again, it's like first hour in the morning, just before the first day or the day is going to open the place. We don't want to do any voiceover. We just need to make a nice music that was composed exclusively for the trailer by the guys from Press Stars. Big hugs to them. They're really cool musicians. And it was like, for me, it was like a mix of really nice music with really nice shots, and in a way that that you could do a movie instead of the typical arch-viz, document basically, visual document. So that was like the premises for that project, and I had to say it went like pretty well. Because as always, like SHL always support our vision, and it's really encouraging. When you don't have those boundaries, it's the best projects you can work in. And I have to say we're really pretty selective in terms of animation. We do animation, but we do each time more and more. We can't showcase nearly. It's like a tip of the iceberg, because lots of that thing is like NDA, etc., etc. But other than that, we always want to be really selective with animation, because not all the people, not all the clients understand that approach to architectural animation.
Well, what do you think is the evolution of architecture visualization? I mean, it's obviously evolved over the last several decades. And what do you think? What is your thoughts on the evolution of how animation has changed in that time?
I think obviously it has evolved, and it has evolved in a good way. In most of the cases, I think we globally as professionals are making a good effort, all of us together, and it's trying to showcase our clients. Okay, guys, no jokes. We're going to do cool stuff if you allow us. It's not the way I see it is not you come with the creative direction. It's us which we bring the creative direction, because that's in which we are educated. Basically, it's like, I'm not going to tell you how you need to design your building. Obviously, you are the architect and you have that, that knowledge, you have that vision. But obviously, I'm going to tell you, or I'm going to try to tell you, which is the best way you can showcase your building. And I think that honestly, and generally speaking, we tend to a more mature way of showcasing architecture. And you see lots of images nowadays, or movies for architecture, that are really more mature, and they are not exclusively the typical cliche that it's what architects at some point could expect, no? Which is like the girl in the first row, or this kind of shit, that normally it doesn't make sense to me. And also, as you evolve as a company and as a professional, you also make an evolution on those regards. It's like, obviously you see images, or I see images we did like 10 years ago when we started, and it's like, oh man, shoot me. But that's good, man. I always say it's good, and it's always good to go back to what you did 9 years ago, because obviously that gives you perspective, and it tells you, okay, man, if you are a little bit embarrassed about what you did like 9 years, that's great. That's because you feel you're doing much better right now. So that's because you have more expertise. You have like worked a lot in evolving. And I think generally speaking, in lots of companies, it has evolved, and also has evolved the way the clients see us, or expect, or have some expectations in what we could deliver to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's always a good thing to. I mean, I remember seeing some of my early works. It's embarrassing, but as you say, if it gets better, then it means you've gotten better, right? So, but I think it's very interesting about talking about influences and how things have influenced you and influenced things along the way. And obviously, what you're also trying to do is influence your customers in some ways based on what you have done and what you have evolved. But what are some of the big things besides architecture that are the biggest influences for you? Like, obviously, there's got to be something in the film world or that has changed and makes you see things differently. So what are some of the things that really inspired you?
Cinema, basically. It's like, I love it. And not only that, it's like being in touch all days with what people is doing. I mean, it's like, you can expect, or you can never, as an artist, I think that's the best way to evolve. It's like to take a look at what this guy or this colleague of yours is doing, and this is an amazing piece. I'm going to try to dissect that and take some learning from that. And basically, I would say cinema for me, it's like I'm always looking at movies or series or whatever it is, but I'm also curious about animation in terms of, let's say, for example, I'm really into a lot recently in anime and manga and stuff like that. And I've always been, but recently I'm doing some experiments, more graphically speaking. So it's like a way of always keep yourself busy. It's like, it's a way I see it. It's like, I'm always doing like personal projects. It's been like 1 year since I haven't released any of them, because it's been like a hell of a year for me in the company, lots of stuff, doing this other art direction for this other company, having a new little baby girl born. Like,
oh, congrats.
Thank you, my man. Like 3 months ago, or
wow.
She will be like 3 months in 1 week. So I mean, it's been really busy. But I would have to say that it's always been excited about anything you can get out that can trigger out some inspiration in you. For example, you see a photography exhibition, and it's like, oh, I love how this guy works with color palette, for example, with lenses, and you try to adapt that to what you are doing, or try to do some experimentation with that. So the way I see this is always like that. It's always to keep evolving and doing like personal projects. It's a moment where I think you grow more as an artist when you're doing your personal stuff, because you don't have any constraint and on any side beside yours. And if you're really like perfectionist, which is my case, it always leads you to, being fucked up.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's really rewarding when you finish something.
Who are some of the filmmakers that you think inspired you the most?
There's I mean, for example, I would say Kurosawa. It's one of my favorite filmmakers. It's all times, and I would say, for example, I love Michel Gondry. I think it's a really badass, and Spike Jonze, but again, Ridley Scott, and has really powerful things and stuff. And I mean, there's thousands of them, and honestly, I don't think I could say this is the one I love the best, because then fuck, man, I forgot about Coppola. I forgot about Scorsese. I love Scorsese. It's just, I mean, they're really solid all-time filmmakers. If you ask me about more modern filmmakers, there's a bunch of people doing cool stuff out there. But yeah, definitely cool classic filmmakers. Kubrick. Who doesn't?
Kubrick, of course.
Who doesn't love Kubrick? Basically.
Well, I was thinking like Villeneuve is probably someone that you would probably.
Villeneuve. And I have to say, he's like a risky guy, because he's like doing films that they are really established IPs, and it's not easy to do that. And I think to make your personal take on Blade Runner, for example, and make it look, you can like it or not, but at least it's your vision. And then it happened with Dune. It's again, obviously he's going to be exposed to lots of criticism, but that's the thing. I mean, shit happens, but for sure, Villeneuve.
I think that's such a very interesting thing about that, and especially because when you look at something like Villeneuve's films, he tends to slow things down so you can appreciate what you're looking at. Yeah, absolutely. Nolan, for example, is other guy.
Nolan does, and not all the works. I mean, I think recently he's evolving to a even more really, complex, for being complex, I guess. But obviously, I think some of these works are brilliant. I love them. It's like it's really visionary.
Now, I'm curious because, you obviously said that there was something when you went to THU that said, okay, I have got to do something, right? And so at THU, obviously, there's not as many ArchViz people there, as you know, but there's a lot of concept artists there and really, really talented concept artists. And I want to know, first is there a specific concept artist that really got you excited? And two, how do you think that concept, the way that concept art is executed, how is that different from ArchViz and visualization in that way?
Okay, so I would say that concept artists, there are zillions out there. I love from Rafael Lacoste, which is like an old timer and former art director of all the Assassin's Creed franchise, and guys like Eitan Sana, Jama Juravive. All that, from Maciej Kuchara. I love all these people, and I have had like the great pleasure of meeting most of them personally after that. And yes, I wouldn't say that it's too different from a still image in architecture. At some point, when you're doing this kind of hero shot of an architectural piece, it's not so different from doing a concept art for Hogwarts Castle in Harry Potter, for example, or doing something for Prometheus, and you're showcasing the big building or whatever. It's not so different because the main principles are the same. It's composition, it's color, it's contrast, it's values, and those are there. For sure you have more, or you are allowed theoretically to have more drama implied into concept art, but nowadays I don't think that's true, because you can find lots of drama and lots of architectural images, and it is cool. It is great. Maybe years ago an architect wouldn't buy that. I would say, no, that's too depressing or whatever. But nowadays you can see lots of images that are really moody in terms of cinematographic quality in architecture, and they work perfectly in terms of grading, in terms of mystery, etc.
I'm actually curious about that. What do you think about the evolution of architecture visualization? Because obviously it has changed. People have looked at things differently. I think when people started to see things like what Alex Roman was doing or what Mir's doing, it's like, oh, you showed the whole building and it's covered in fog. It's like, you know what I mean? You would never be allowed to do that 20 years ago.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. I think that's part of this evolution I mentioned, and it's like, for sure, my good friends of my Norwegian friends of Mir, hats off to them. And basically, I think that's the thing. It's like, how could we impress not only ourselves, firstly ourselves, because when you impress yourself and you have some level of expertise, I bet my ass or 90% that you're going to impress your customers. Mostly sure, and these guys saw things in a different way, and it's like it's also the way we try to do in beauty. It's like, okay, why if we try to search for a different angle, a different thematic, a different whatever, and try not, at some point obviously you're going to repeat yourself, because that happens. You can be reinventing the wheel all days, but at least to have an approach which is not the super used or abused approach, which is like, okay, this kind of stupid things about PDFs, as I always call them, the PDF checkers, when somebody or some project manager comes to you and then it's like, but we need to cover all these PDF topics, and it's like, man, you can have a guy in front row having some spaghettis and looking at your building and reading at the same time the tablet with something in his tablet which is like New York Times or whatever it is, I don't care. So and then at the same time in the mid ground you have this other activity which is a baseball game or whatever, and then you're building. Okay, you have so many layers, man, that you're not going to, you don't have a strong concept in the image, but it takes time and years to realize that and be consistent with that. And maybe sometimes when you're discussing with some project manager, maybe they don't have so much time or expertise. That is why you're trying to tell them, okay, guys, there's a better way. And sometimes it happens, you achieve that. Some of you don't achieve that.
Well, I'm curious about that too. I mean, obviously, I know, from some listening, I've had the pleasure of meeting some of the old school ArchViz, not ArchViz. They were just basically architectural illustrators. They were watercolorists and stuff like that, right? And those guys are really great, but they were used to operating within a certain set of rules for so long. The building has to have straight lines. You can't do it this. You can't do that. And what I think you can do is basically what you're showing is like, what if I break all those rules, right? What if I used people showcase buildings in movies all the time and they never use those rules?
Yeah,
right?
That's the thing. I mean, we shouldn't. Or at least as far as I see it, those rules shouldn't be so rigid. Because at some point, when it's good to know the rules, and because you can do obviously you have to have foundations, and so your basement is really solid. But for sure, when you have those foundations, you need to trespass that and be bold at some point and say, okay, what if, for example, we turn around things and try to look at this building or this concept or whatever this way? Would that work? And sometimes you have so pretty good accidents or natural accidents that it's like much better than the typical approach.
Right. But you do. But how do you fight that thing? Because where you have a story you want to tell, you think it would be more powerful, right? And then someone's like, "Yes, but I want to showcase the lobby. I want to showcase this. I want to do this. I have to show the parking lot."
I always say is that you should know at some point when you have years of expertise to know which battles you should fight and which ones you should say, "Go fuck it, man."
Right.
I want to live relaxed, and this what I'm not going to fight it because it's not deserved. You know what I mean? It's when you have a client that it's mostly most of the times, or that it's a reasonable client, and it's like there's like an open dialogue. It's not it's not this because I say it has to be this because I'm the creative director. No, it's not that. It's like I'm gonna give you reasons for this. And then maybe you give me your reasons on the other side of the fence, which is like, oh, yeah, but I'm the architect. I have to sell this to my client, and then I can say, okay, yes, you're right. So let's get even, and let's do a mix of both ideas, and we can arrive to an agreement. And it could end up being a really cool and terrific story, and it's a teamwork. Okay. Then you have another scenario, which is like they rely on you absolutely, so you are really fortunate because you have even more artistic freedom, which is like the most desirable of the scenarios. At some point it's desirable, but you also be careful because you're on your own. Okay, so if you fuck it up, you fuck it up. And C is like the scenario in which these guys, for example, are really authoritarian. It's like, no, but I want to see this, and this, and let me show you. I'm going to tell you how to do things. Right. So it's like, okay, man, but it makes no sense to hire us and to come to us if you want this kind of images, if you're going to consistently go against the flow. You know what I mean? But again, I'm not going to fight it, man. I want to get back home to play with my kids, to do my shit there, and go and swim a little bit, and you have to know which battles you have to basically fight and which ones.
Was my when I was at DD, we used to call that at some point you have to let the Wookiee win.
Absolutely.
Just let the Wookiee win on this one.
Absolutely, 100%, man.
But it is also that it's true. It's a shame. It's their loss, right? They hired you guys specifically because you guys think creatively and you're supposed to be collaborative. And it's a shame that they don't do that. But that's fine. It's a paycheck. It's a paycheck. It's
absolutely. And also, to be honest and to be fair with these companies that sometimes happen, I'm not saying this from a point of being like angry with them, which is not the case. Basically, because I also could understand their motivations. It's like maybe they are really rigid because their processes are really measured and they always give the same thing to the clients, and for them they are okay. So I mean, I don't look that from the younger side of life, basically.
Right. Right. Now, okay, so you mentioned also, your different scenarios of collaboration that you do. One where it's very restrictive, one is complete freedom, and the other one where you are working together. I find sometimes when you work together with a customer and you try to say problem solve it from different angles, and sometimes you come up with even better idea that you would come up on your own, right?
Yeah.
So tell us some of the customers like that where the collaboration has been really, really good at telling the story that you guys wanted to tell together.
Mm-hmm. Well, for example, we have lots of them, and I would say like mostly, some of them are more rigid, and because of those reasons, we commented that. For example, with the Schmidt Hammerlassen, it's always been like from day one, and we've been working with them since our beginning, so it's like 10 years now, and
right,
and it's always like amazing working with them because we arrived to a point of confidence between each other, and it's like. I always compare this when I think maybe you were like part musician. I don't know, because lots of us, we are like creative. We always are musicians at some point or the other. So
sure.
I always compare this like a jamming, when you're jamming with some people, and
yep.
you understand yourself. It's like you're playing like 3 chords and then somebody comes in and gets in with the solo or do something in a line in the bass or some whatever in the drums, and it's like there's chemistry there. So with these guys, for example, there's always chemistry. Big is also a really cool studio to work with. We're Kingals. Yeah, because they have lots of projects also, and they initially, even they have their constraints in what they have to show, they have to whatever. They normally are really open-minded about new ideas, and that's cool. That's amazing. And also, not only like big studios, okay, because also little studios we've worked with, they're really sympathetic. And for example, you can work with a studio that it's like, I can't remember names because I'm really fucking bad at that. And at some point, it's like you have your head full of names.
Sure,
but
sure.
We've recently worked with some little studios that wanted to come with us for several competitions, and the chemistry was amazing because they were so open-minded, maybe because they didn't have so many layers to filter the project, so the communication was really direct, and it was like, okay, what if we do this, guys? Wouldn't it be cool? And it was, oh yeah, go for it, and it was really cool. But yeah, I mean, I would say like to say that it's not, or that chemistry is not depending on the size of the studio. I mean, you can work with a really big studio, and it's really difficult to work with, and maybe you can find a small studio and it's really cool, and vice versa. You can work with a small studio that is like a pain in your ass because it's really difficult to pull out the things, and vice versa, basically.
Right, for sure. It's interesting that you say. I mean, I think Big. Obviously, I've always been an admirer of Big and their architecture, but I think it's because I think a lot like you, Victor, because I love narrative in architecture. I love to tell the story that's happening, and I feel that architecture always tells an interesting story, or should tell an interesting story, and. And that's what I think. Whenever there's missing, that's missing, I always feel it. And I think with Big, they always tend to tell a story. They're always telling stories, right?
Yeah.
At least he is, and he presents his stuff like he's telling a great story. And I think that lends itself so well to what you guys do, because you're trying to give that visual narrative in a lot of ways. So, Big, yeah. I think that's a good combination for me to definitely see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but what do you think about? Okay, so obviously, we've talked about how ArchViz has changed over time. So, where do you think some of the future of this is going to be? What do you think are going to change the way that you look at narratives and the way you look at how we're going to be doing the work that you guys do?
I think one I don't know, it's always a tricky question, the future. I don't know which is going to be the future. What I can not predict, but what I'm each time more and more happy is obviously how technology boosts productivity, but not necessarily productivity, but more in the artistic sense of it. It's like, okay. If we can have like more powerful computers, programs, real-time software, etc., that makes me being more creative, I'm on that boat. So and recently from some time until now. I'm doing lots of time lots of stuff in real time, and because for me it gives me lots of freedom, and I think it's something that is eventually gonna come, whether it's like Unreal or other real-time technology. I think also V-Ray has its own vantage thing. I think it's called or Unity, or that's real-time thing. It's really important for me because it's like this feeling when you're fighting with a image or an animation. It's like you have to wait forever for that, and it's like I'm not a patient guy anymore. I have a little bit of an age, and it's like, fucking man, I don't want to be waiting for a week until I see the result of this.
Right.
So for me, and generally speaking, also architects, they are using each time more real-time technology because I think it's the future at some point. It's like, okay, do we have a model of this? How we want to showcase this? We want to see quickly results in terms of how if we light up this way, or if we put the camera here, or if we tell the story this other way. You know what I mean? It's like for me it's really important that to be able to do that in little time. It gives me more freedom as a creator. Basically, it's like and obviously it's a easier way to discard ideas which are not good ideas. It's like maybe you think this is cool, and then no, it looks like shit. Fuck it up. So I think it goes, in my opinion, that way.
Well, I absolutely agree with you that real time is actually going to change a lot of the way that we look at CG, and especially in architecture in a lot of ways. I think that's, and we'll keep talking about that. But before we talk about that, what about just the idea that if real time technology is much more accessible in a lot of ways, do you feel that architects may feel like, well, I'll just do it myself?
Oh, okay.
And I don't need any of this stuff. I'll just you want to see the building? You see the building.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes people think of real time, they forget about the narrative.
Yeah. Yeah, but honestly, I don't buy that, and I will tell you my point on that. It's like, okay, yes, but like 10 years ago or 7 years ago, there were already geeks like me or like you or whoever in those on those studios doing renders, and and each time things evolve. There's a lot of studios that have their own intern team, and even studios that I have mentioned before, they have their own intern team, but they still come to us and say, okay, this project is for Beauty and the Beat, because they know exactly that the narrative for that project belongs to us, or we are more aligned, we have more expertise.
Sure.
So it's like, the way I see it is like, there's always going to be a need for a critical eye or an expert eye to tell stories that matter at some point. It's like, okay, you can do a spot with your colleague that has learned, cinema. He came out from the cinema academy, or you can hire Ridley Scott to do your advertisement piece or whatever. Obviously, the result is different or will be different. So honestly, I don't see it. Yeah, it's like, we don't need these people. I don't think so. Yeah, maybe you don't need these people for doing a really quick premise of what you want to see, if the space is working, if the proportions are correct, if everything is flowing in terms of the project. But then to showcase that in an artistic way is a whole different. Requires a different sets of skills, I guess.
Do you think that that's something that you have to, I mean, obviously you said your customers come to you either way, which is a great news, but do you think that in some cases in the architectural world, people like, when they think of real time, they kind of forget about the narrative? They go back to what we used to do 20 years ago, where they're just driving around it like a video game?
Yeah. I think like there are different media in terms of, okay, one thing is like a descriptive visual tools or documents, which is like, let's say you have like a VR goggles and you're exploring the place. That's one thing. And a different complete thing is, okay, but I'm going to give it a twist, or I'm going to showcase like a more artistic composition, a little movie or whatever, and it's a different product. So for example, the first one could be when you're going to showcase the client with the goggles, and they're going to, oh, look at the building, oh, look at those lamps, they're hanging from the ceiling, Okay, and then you're going to go to the big auditorium, going to showcase your movie with your building in some hero shots or whatever it is,
Sure.
So it's they're different media, I think, as far as I see it.
Yes, but okay. So you hear me out about this. It's like, what now? We're getting some really amazing real-time tools, and I've been doing a lot of them as well, looking a lot into this. And so the thing is, a little bit is these tools are based on video games, right? So a lot of times the experiences, even when people do, cinematics, they look like video games, really good video games, but they look like video games.
Yeah.
They don't have a cinematic look to them sometimes. And there's something that sometimes misses in some of that experience.
Yeah.
And I think, based on what you were saying earlier, I believe that there's actually something really great about what you guys are doing in terms of trying to tell a story in certain ways, and the feedback that you get from real time is very powerful because you can iterate much faster. You can go whoa, whoop, up, 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 right? But there's sometimes I feel that there's something is like, that looks like a really beautiful video game, and I love video games.
Yeah, no. I absolutely understand your point. Honestly, to be honest, what I'm trying to do on those regards is try to not making it look like a video game. That's right. That is my and all the jobs.
And that's a skill set you have to get, right.
All the stuff that I'm doing in these regards, even if it's like personal stuff or things in beauty, are on that direction. It's like, okay, let's try to do it as realistic as possible on one way, and on the other way is like, let's try to do it as non-realistic as possible, but really graphical. It's like, right, it's not okay. This is the look that the video game engine, for example, provides me. I will go with this. No. Let's try to push it to this side and this other side. Let's experiment and not only get focused about how many millions of polygons I can get in the scene, and you know what I mean? It's
Sure. Well, that's my experience, for example, because I've worked in the film industry as well. I look at something and it's like, I find that 24 frames a second with motion blur looks much more cinematic than 120 frames a second.
Absolutely. In fact, it's funny because yesterday, I'm doing a piece right now that I'm rendering at 12 frames per second.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like more animation, classic animation. So absolutely. In the end, I don't give a the F word. I don't care at all about that. It's like who has the biggest frame ratio, whatever. It's not, that is not important for me. That is not relevant. It's like you could do something which is like a traditional animation, drawing slide by slide, and if the idea is beautiful, that's gonna be awesome. That's what I'm saying. It's like technology is great for lots of things. For example, as we spoke, it's like if you can boost productivity, or you can see the end result or what could be end result really fast, that's amazing. I'm in that boat. But be careful. That doesn't have to be like the main direction of what you're doing. That you don't have to base all your work on that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
First comes the idea. If the idea is good, you can do it at 150 frames per second or 12 frames per second, but because the idea is good,
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that some of the things that you do influence the architecture itself?
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be pretentious in that way, because Landmark was great. Then I did Rebirth, which was also a cool project to be involved in, and that was really mediatic. But honestly, I don't know if what we do is influencing architecture or not. I would love to at least think that what we do is solid, is a labor of love. You know what I mean? It's like when you present your work, you are proud of what you do. Yeah, obviously you will have bad images, bad movies, because shit happens, and that's good. And it's good to have bad movies or bad images, honestly, because they remind you, okay, I fucked it up in this project because this and this and this, you know. And then you have your lesson learned, you know. And so I don't know if what we do have impact has had any impact in architecture or architectural visualization. I want to believe that at least in architectural communication some impact has had, because we are followed or notorious at some point, you know. But honestly, that's nothing I ask myself to frequently, because in all honesty, from 1 year ago I haven't been too much in contact with architecture. I mean, yes, I'm in contact with architecture in a more creative direction in the studio to say, okay, let's try this and that. But I'm more involved in more nowadays in more other experiences, which are more like their experiences, musical experiences, video game experiences, etc., etc.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, real quick. So, what obviously you said, some of the things when you started your company, you wanted, and maybe if I can start my own company, and you did that. And then maybe I could work for some of these great architects, and then you did that. Maybe I can do my own thing, and then you did that. And so you've done all these things along the way. What's left for you? What's the next thing that you want to do?
To be honest, I'm pretty happy with my life nowadays in terms of artistically speaking. It's like I have my own company, which is this one. The company is really cool. It's a really healthy company with really healthy people and non-toxic people, which is always great. And then I'm the art director of another startup company, which is Stage 11. So tell us a little bit about that one. Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's like 1 year ago, somebody contacted me, which is like the CEO of this company, Jonathan, and it was like, man, I love your work, and I would like you to be the art director in my company. So your company we're starting, but potentially we're going to do this and this and this, which is like trying to do or to bring music and concerts and artists and fashion and into the video game world at some point, and make like a mashup and work in the metaverse and really exciting projects. And basically, I cannot say too much about what we're doing because it's all nearly all in NDA. You can there's like a little sneak peek video that they published like 1 week or 2 weeks ago, but they are
is there a website?
They're like big stars already there we are collaborating with them, but we are right now in the process of maybe in the earlier stages of the production. But what I'm trying to say is that I'm really happy with my life nowadays because I have that. I'm really busy all day, and I can also have my personal projects, which I'm doing maybe at a slower pace because right now it's like everything together. This company, my company, my little daughter, etc., etc. But I keep doing this shit because for me it's really relieves my stress. And honestly, what I would love to do, it's directing. It's something that I have in mind for the future. Not only doing direction of cinematic pieces, which I have already done, cinematics, and I'm doing right now cinematics, aside from art direction in this company, but also like old school cinema, directing something in the future. Yeah, I know I'm a really old guy, but I also have like the idea that if you want something with all your guts and you put all your energy in that, in the end, you will end up doing something cool at some point. So yeah, that's my take. But honestly, as I said, I have a really happy life now, artistically speaking, nowadays.
That's awesome. Okay, well then, if people are struggling with their lives, artistically speaking, what advice would you give them right now?
It's a difficult one, but I mean, it's not so difficult for me, or at least in my personal experience. I've struggled as any other artist, because you have highs and lows, that's for sure. And you're gonna be happy at some point and really, overpowered, and you're gonna be really fucked up at the times, because shit happens. And but my main advice, if I would call piece of advice is like keep improving, keep being passionate. If you feel you're burnt out, okay, go to the park, go to swim, go to with your girlfriend, with your boyfriend, do whatever you want to do. Take energy again, and keep being inspired. Whether if it's like as I said, a photography exposition, as if it's like an anime comic, as if it's a movie, a series, or watching your son playing PlayStation, for example, or whatever. Get inspired from everything you can absorb from people, from situations. Then try to channel that in what you do, and never be afraid of failing, because it's a really overused topic, but it's true. It's like you're not going to be successful until you fail several times. Okay, let's hope you don't fail so many, because that would mean that you're an intelligent person and you take acknowledge for things that happened to you in the past, but eventually you will fail.
You will fail.
Absolutely.
And that's a good thing. It's a good thing.
That's absolutely, my man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Victor. This has been absolutely great talking to you.
Yeah, no problem.
Wonderful conversation. Hopefully someday we will run into each other again, maybe next year at THU.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll do that.
Absolutely. Or you want to come to Madrid, you can be my guest. Absolutely. We can.
I'd love to do that. That'd be great.
We'll throw a party at you.
That sounds good.
Or if I go to LA, you're in LA based.
Yeah.
Yeah, but because I will be in LA, I can predict in a regular basis. So next time I go there, I will ping you and we can have some fun.
Sounds like fun, man. All right. Thank you, Victor.
Yeah, no
Have
problem.
a good one.